You're crouched in a frozen grass, and 40 feet away there's an animal that could crush a truck. A mammoth, 11 feet at the shoulder, tusks longer than you are. It's pulling grass out of the snow, not looking at you, because right now it has no reason to. You are holding a spear that weighs less than your arm, and beside you, 3 other people are holding the exact same thing. Nobody here is strong enough to punch through a hide that thick with muscle alone. Nobody here can outrun something this size once it decides to charge. And there is no backup coming. This is the whole plan. 4 people, 4 spears, and an animal that has never once in its life had a reason to fear anything on 2 legs. So here's the real question. Humans show up in the Americas, a continent with zero history of humans ever existing there. And within a couple thousand years, they're taking down the biggest land animals the world has ever seen. That doesn't happen because people got braver. It happens because somebody built something, multiple somethings actually, in wildly different places, solving completely different problems. And one of those inventions is hiding a piece of engineering so subtle, archaeologists argued about what it was even for almost a century. Let's start at the beginning, not with the weapon everyone assumes is the answer, with the ones that came first. Picture an open grassland, no trees to hide behind, no rocks to sneak around, just flat land in every direction, and out there, something fast. A guanaco, an early horse, an animal that can outrun a human without breaking a sweat. A spear is useless here. You can't get close enough to throw one before the animal is gone. You need something that doesn't need to be close, something that doesn't even need to hit hard. It just needs to hit the legs. The answer people came up with is almost stupidly simple. Take a length of cord, tie a stone weight to each end. Now you have 2 heavy points connected by rope, and when you spin that thing over your head and let it fly, it doesn't fly straight like a spear. It spreads out, spinning through the air like a net made of rocks. That's a bola. You're not trying to kill the animal with it. You're trying to wrap it around the legs mid-stride and take the animal's speed away. Once something that fast stops being fast, the fight is already over. Archaeologists working sites across Patagonia and the open plains of South America keep finding sets of smoothed, grooved stones in matched pairs and trios, dating back thousands of years, right alongside the bones of exactly the fast-running animals you'd expect a bola to be built for. Here's what's genuinely clever about it, though. A bola doesn't require you to be strong. It doesn't require perfect aim at a vital spot the way a spear does. It requires you to hit a general area, legs moving in a blur, and physics does the rest. That's a weapon designed around the terrain, not around brute force. Open ground rewards range and disruption over raw power. But the plains weren't the only environment people were walking into. And the next tool tells you something stranger, because it should have gone extinct a long time before it actually did. For a long time, the assumption was that the bow arrived in North America early and spread fast. But a study published in 2026 went back and did something nobody had really done properly before. Instead of guessing weapon type from stone points alone, which is unreliable because a small stone tip could belong to a dart, an arrow, or a javelin, researchers led by archaeologist Briggs Buchanan tracked down 136 actual radiocarbon-dated organic weapons. Real wood, real shafts, real bows, arrows, atlatls, and darts, pulled mostly out of melting alpine ice patches and dry caves where the material had survived intact instead of rotting away. Their conclusion was that the bow didn't show up across Western North America until around 1,400 years ago. Not 12,000, not 8,000, 1,400. Which means for roughly 11,000 years before that, from the moment humans were taking down mammoths to well into farming societies elsewhere in the world, the primary weapon across huge parts of this continent was still the Atlatl, a hooked throwing stick launching a heavy dart, refined generation after generation, doing a job people apparently didn't feel any urgent need to replace. And when the bow finally does show up, it doesn't behave the same way everywhere. South of a rough line running through northern British Columbia and Alberta, the switch is fast and total. The Atlatl basically vanishes from the record within a few generations of the bow's arrival. But north of that line, in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, hunters did something stranger. They kept both, side by side, for over 1,000 years. That's not indecision. Buchanan's team argues it's risk management. In harsh, unpredictable environments where one failed hunt could mean starving through a winter, carrying multiple proven tools was smarter than betting everything on the newer one. The Atlatl may have simply held real advantages in extreme cold, where a bow's wood and sinew can lose their spring, or against heavier prey that rewarded a dart's greater mass and stopping power over an arrow's speed. There's an even stranger wrinkle underneath all of this. A separate 2026 study, led by Metin Aaron, went looking for Atlatl weights and hooks specifically from the Clovis era, the same window as our mammoth hunters in beginning of this video, and came up empty. Their argument is that the Atlatl might not have crossed into the Americas with the very first migrants at all. It may have been invented independently, later, sometime around 10,000 years ago, completely separate from its known appearance in places like Ice Age France 25,000 years earlier. Two continents, two separate inventions of the same idea, thousands of years apart, arrived at through the same basic problem. If that holds up, it means our mammoth hunters weren't necessarily throwing Atlatl darts at all. They may have been doing something even riskier, closing distance with heavy thrusting spears and javelins. No lever, no mechanical advantage, just raw nerve and a very good stone point. Either way, the pattern is the same. New technology doesn't erase old technology just because it exists somewhere on the planet. It has to actually be better for the specific problem in front of you in the specific place you're standing. On the American plains, apparently, for 11,000 years, it wasn't. Then you go south, into the trees, and the entire strategy flips upside down. In dense rainforest, everything that worked on the plains falls apart. You can't spin a bola. There's no room. Branches everywhere. You can't get a clean throw with an Atlatl. The canopy is in the way, and the moment your arm swings up, every animal in the trees above you knows exactly where you are and vanishes. Speed and power stop being the advantage. Stealth becomes the entire game. So in parts of Central and South America, people built something that doesn't rely on force at all. A blowgun, a hollow tube, sometimes remarkably long and precisely bored, firing a dart so light you could barely feel it land. On its own, that dart does almost nothing. It's not going to punch through hide or bring down anything with real mass behind it, which is exactly why the dart was never the weapon. The tip was coated with something else. Certain groups in the Amazon developed plant-based poisons, compounds we now group under the term curare, extracted through processes that took real accumulated botanical knowledge. Which vines, which bark, which combination boiled down over hours into a paste potent enough to paralyze. Curare doesn't work if you eat meat that's been killed with it. It has to enter the bloodstream directly to shut down the nervous system. That means whoever figured this out wasn't guessing. Somebody, generations back, worked out through trial and testing exactly how this poison behaves, how it kills through a wound but leaves the meat itself completely safe to eat. That's not folklore. That's applied pharmacology, developed centuries before anyone had a microscope. A blowgun dart hits a monkey high in the canopy, barely a scratch. But within minutes, the muscles stop answering the brain, breathing slows, and the animal quietly drops. No stampede, no chase across open ground, no injury risk to the hunter at all. Just patience and a very small, very quiet piece of engineering doing the entire job from a distance. 3 environments, 3 completely different answers. A weighted cord for open ground, a tuned dart thrower for heavy, dangerous prey, a silent poisoned needle for a world hidden in leaves. And then there's the piece that ties directly back to where we started. The mammoth, the 4 hunters, the impossible math of that hunt actually working. Across North America, archaeologists keep pulling the same style of stone spear point out of the ground. Beautifully made, symmetrical, sharp on both edges, and with a distinctive channel called a flute, carved up the center of the stone from the base almost to the tip. This is a Clovis point, and it shows up at site after site, dated to roughly 13,000 years ago, made to a strikingly consistent design across an enormous stretch of the continent. For decades, the assumed explanation for the flute was simple. It helped the point sit snugly in a split split wooden or bone shaft so it could be tied on more securely. Practical, sure, but that explanation always felt a little thin because fluting a stone point this way is hard. It's one of the most difficult, failure-prone steps in the entire process. Strike wrong and the whole point shatters. Why would anyone build in that much risk just to make hafting slightly easier when simpler notching methods already existed and worked fine? That question sent researchers back to test the points the only way you really can, by breaking them. Experimental archaeologists have built faithful reproductions of Clovis points and driven them into simulated flesh and bone, ballistics gel, animal carcasses, controlled impact rigs, and compared how fluted points behave against similar points without the flute. What they found reframes the entire tool. The flute isn't primarily about attaching the point to the shaft. It changes how the stone itself absorbs a hit. A solid, thick stone point is strong right up until the moment it isn't. Then it shatters outward in a burst, because rigid stone has nowhere to put the shock of a hard impact. The flute changes that. It thins the center of the point and lets it flex, just slightly, at the exact moment it meets something hard, like mammoth bone. That tiny bit of give is the difference between a point that survives the hit and drives deeper, and a point that detonates into fragments on the first strike. Sit with that for a second. Roughly 13,000 years ago, someone with no metallurgy, no physics textbook, nothing but stone, patience, and repeated failure, worked out that a weapon needed a small structural weakness on purpose, engineered in exactly the right place, so it wouldn't have a much bigger uncontrolled weakness everywhere else. That's not just a sharp rock. That's shock absorption, worked out through trial and error against the biggest, toughest animals on the continent, and then standardized and taught point after point across a landmass thousands of miles wide. That's what those 4 hunters were actually holding in the beginning of this video. Not just a sharpened point, a point engineered specifically not to fail on impact with an animal built like a tank. So, what was the deadliest weapon ancient Americans ever built? Here's the honest answer. There wasn't one. There were 4, and none of them would have worked anywhere else.